In the Renaissance, a single, misplaced line of ink on a map could start a war, bankrupt a nation, or lead a fleet of ships to oblivion. For the young apprentices tasked with drawing the world, every day was a battle between art, science, and state secrets. Hello, and welcome back to If History Had Read It. Find your comfortable position, let your shoulders soften, and allow the day to recede. We are about to journey into that quiet, high-stakes world, the workshops of the great mapmakers. If you find comfort in these stories, please consider liking the video and subscribing. Your quiet support is deeply appreciated and allows these forgotten voices to be heard. Now, settle in. Tonight, we will listen to 4 quiet accounts from the workshops of Venice, Lisbon, and Florence. 4 whispers from the past that tell the story of confronting the great blank spaces on the map. Our journey begins now. The city of Venice, in the full flower of its mercantile power, was a symphony of managed chaos. From the water, it was a miracle of marble and ambition, a city that floated on a forest of submerged logs, its foundations defying the natural order. But from within its labyrinthine heart, the experience was different. It was a place of perpetual sound and scent, a sensory world so dense it could be overwhelming. The constant lapping of water against stone formed the city's foundational rhythm, a gentle, insistent percussion beneath everything else. Upon this was layered the sharp cries of gondoliers navigating the tight corners of the canals, the resonant tolling of 100 church bells marking the hours for prayer and commerce, and the distant percussive sound of hammers from the Arsenal, the great state shipyard where the Republic's power was forged in timber and pitch. The air itself was a complex mixture, thick with the brine of the lagoon, the sharp smell of fish from the markets, the pervasive dampness of ancient stone, and carried on the breeze the exotic scent of spices, cinnamon, clove, and pepper being unloaded from galleys that had returned from the Levant. It was a city built on information. The price of silk in Damascus, the political mood in Cairo, the location of a new spring of fresh water on a distant Aegean island. These were the currencies that mattered as much as the golden ducat. And the ultimate expression of this information, the most valuable commodity of all, was the map. In a quiet, second-story room overlooking one of the smaller, less trafficked canals, away from the grandeur of the Piazza San Marco, was the workshop of Maestro Valerius, one of the city's most respected cartographers. To step through its heavy oak door was to leave the clamor of Venice behind and enter a sanctuary of contemplation. The air here was different, still and warm, heavy with its own unique catalogue of scents. The dry, slightly sweet smell of vellum and parchment, the sharp metallic tang of iron gall ink, and the earthy aroma of gum arabic used to bind it. There was the subtle fragrance of linseed oil, mixed with crushed minerals and plant extracts to create the vibrant pigments that would bring the maps to life. The brilliant blue of lapis lazuli for the oceans, the rich green of malachite for forests, the fiery red of vermilion for city names and rum lines. The entire room smelled of meticulous craft, of knowledge being given physical form. The workshop was a space of ordered precision. Along one wall, dozens of rolled charts, each tied with a colored ribbon and labeled with a slip of parchment, were stored in a grid of wooden cubbyholes. Below them sat heavy wooden chests bound in iron, which held the master charts, the priceless documents that were the foundation of the workshop's reputation. The main space was dominated by a vast, slanting table, its surface scarred with the faint impressions of countless previous projects, a ghost history of coastlines drawn and redrawn. On this table and on smaller desks nearby lay the tools of the trade, each in its proper place: brass dividers and calipers for measuring distance, elegant compasses for drawing perfect circles, honed quills from geese and swans, their tips sharpened to a needle-fine point. There were pumice stones for smoothing the surface of the vellum, making it receptive to the ink, and small, clean rags for correcting the tiniest of errors. In one corner, a collection of globes, both terrestrial and celestial, stood like silent sentinels, reflecting the soft, watery light that filtered through the leaded glass window. That light was a key tool in itself. In Venice, light is a living thing, bouncing off the canal's surface and projecting a shimmering, dancing pattern onto the ceiling, a constant, gentle reminder of the water that was both the city's lifeblood and its master. Here, in this haven of focused intellect, our young apprentice, Piero, was at work. He was perhaps 17 years of age, with the lean build of one who often forgot to eat, his dark hair falling across his brow as he hunched over the great table. His fingers, though scrubbed, bore the faint, permanent stains of black and red ink, the badges of his profession. For 3 years, he had been under the tutelage of Maestro Valerius, a man whose name was whispered with reverence in the halls of the Doge's palace and the boardrooms of the city's most powerful trading syndicates. The maestro was not merely a draftsman. He was a geographer, an astronomer, a historian, and a keeper of state-level intelligence. His standards were legendarily high, his praise was rare, and his displeasure was a quiet, suffocating thing that could make the workshop feel airless for days. Piero's task today was a microcosm of the entire challenge of his age. Spread before him was a magnificent, creamy sheet of calfskin vellum, nearly 4 feet across, stretched taut and pinned to the table. It was a costly piece of material, and the knowledge that a single, uncorrectable slip of his hand could ruin it was a constant, low-level pressure. He had already laid down the delicate, web-like grid of rhumb lines emanating from a series of compass points, the foundational structure of any Portolan chart. But now came the true test, the work of cartographic alchemy. He was charged with drawing a new, definitive coastline for a stretch of West Africa, a region of burgeoning importance, as Portuguese ships pushed ever further south, seeking a sea route to the Indies, bypassing Venice's traditional overland dominance. The problem was not a lack of information, but a surplus of it. Beside his pristine vellum lay his sources, 3 different charts, 3 conflicting stories. The first was a handsome, professional-looking chart, acquired at great expense from a Genoese merchant. Its lines were confident, its lettering clear. It depicted a specific bay along the coast as a deep, welcoming harbor, marked with an anchor symbol and the notation Porto Sicuro, safe harbor. It was, on its surface, the most trustworthy of the documents. The second was a cruder thing, a true sailor's chart. It was drawn on cheaper parchment, stained with what could only be seawater and wine. Its lines were sketched with a hurried hand, but it was covered in annotations, the practical notes of a man whose life depended on accuracy. This chart, from a Portuguese captain who had recently returned from the region, showed the exact same bay as a treacherous maze of sandbars and mangrove swamps, with a chilling note, Aguas baixas, morte certa, shallow waters, certain death. The third chart was the oldest, a relic from the workshop's own archives, drawn a generation earlier. It was more art than science. Where the bay should have been, the previous cartographer, faced with uncertainty, had simply covered the area with an elegant stylized drawing of a coiled sea serpent, its scales shimmering with faded gold leaf. It was beautiful, but it was an admission of ignorance, a placeholder for a truth yet to be discovered. Piero's dilemma was profound. This was not a simple act of copying. It was an act of judgment, of investigation. He was a detective, and his clues were these 3 disparate pieces of parchment. He had to weigh the evidence. The Genoese chart was clean, but was it too clean? Perhaps it was a copy of a copy, its details sanitized and its warnings lost. The Portuguese chart was messy, but felt more authentic, more immediate. Had its captain been there during a low tide or in a dry season that made the swamp seem more impassable than it truly was? Or was the Genoese captain lying, deliberately mapping a false harbor to lure rival ships to their doom, a common enough form of mercantile warfare? And what of the sea serpent? It was a beautiful evasion, but his master and the merchants who would pay a fortune for this new map did not pay for evasions, they paid for answers. The pressure mounted with each passing hour. The sounds from the canal seemed to fade away, replaced by the internal debate raging in Piero's mind. The decision he made, the line he chose to draw, would have real consequences. It could guide a Venetian galley laden with goods and men to a safe anchorage, or it could lead them to splinter on a hidden reef. The fate of sailors he would never meet, the success of voyages yet to be planned, depended on his ability to sift truth from error, from malice, and from fantasy. His master would expect not just a drawing, but a justification for every curve of the coast, every notation. As the watery afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across the workshop, Piero picked up a fresh quill, his heart heavy with the burden of his choice. It is from this moment of quiet crisis that our first post emerges from the past.
The vellum is so white. It stares up at me like a blank sky. And it cost more than I earn in 2 months. Maestro Valerius reminded me of that this morning. Not in a cruel way, just a simple fact. This skin is from a calf that never saw a second spring, Piero. Do not dishonor its sacrifice with a careless hand. No, not cruel. Just heavy. Everything in this room is heavy. And the master wants this section finished by Friday. He has a meeting with the Signori di Dieci, the Council of 10. Men whose faces you see in shadows. Men who do not like to be kept waiting. And he will take my work, my line, and he will present it as truth. The truth. I have 3 of them here, and they are all liars. I look at the Genoese chart. It is beautiful. The man who drew this was a master draftsman. The lettering is perfect, a perfect slanted script. The coastline is a single, confident, flowing line, and there it is, the bay. He calls it Porto Sicuro. He's even drawn a little anchor, shaded with ink wash to make it look solid. Safe harbor. It looks so inviting. I want to believe it. It would be so easy to believe it. I could just copy this line. My own hand could mimic that same confidence. Maestro Valerius would look at it, nod, and see the elegance of the Genoese school. He might even be pleased.
But I have been a sailor's son longer than I have been an apprentice. My father's hands were not elegant. They were rope-scarred and raw. And the sea is not elegant. It is a monster that smiles. This chart is too clean. It has never been to sea. It was drawn in a quiet room just like this one by a man in clean clothes who was paid to draw a pretty picture. Perhaps the captain who gave the report was a liar, a braggart. He found a muddy creek and called it a grand harbor to make his voyage sound more important. Or he is a true Genoese, clever and cruel. He knows his republic's rivals will pay for copies of his chart, and he has drawn a trap. He has baited it with a beautiful anchor and a lovely name. He wants to see Venetian ships break their backs on hidden rocks. I can see him, a fat merchant with a smug smile, counting the ducats he earned for this lie. Then there is the second chart, the Portuguese one. It is the opposite in every way. It is ugly. The parchment is cheap. It's warped from damp. There is a dark ring on one corner where a sailor put his wet cup of wine. The coastline is a jagged, angry thing, a sketch, but it feels real. It smells of salt and sweat, and where the Genoese drew his lovely harbor, this man has drawn a mess of dots and crosses like a field of graves. He has written aguas baixas, morte certa, shallow waters, certain death. His handwriting is terrible, a barely literate scrawl, but I can hear his voice in it. A warning, a desperate, honest warning. I trust this chart more. I feel it in my gut. This man was there. He felt his ship scrape the bottom. He saw the mangrove roots like skeletal fingers reaching for his hull. He escaped, and he marked his terror on this sheet so others would not share his fate. I should draw this. This feels like the truth.
But what if he is the liar? The Portuguese are our rivals too. They guard their new routes to Africa like a jealous husband guards his wife. They do not want us following them. What if this swamp is actually the safe harbor, and this terrified scrawl is the lie? A clever lie, because it looks so honest in its ugliness. He wants us to be afraid. He wants Venetian captains to see this chart, to see morte certa, and sail on by, leaving the riches of the interior for Portugal alone. It is a brilliant deception, if that's what it is. To make the truth look like a lie, and a lie look like the truth. My head aches. I press the cold brass of my dividers to my forehead. It does not help. Maestro Valerius says a map is an argument. Every line, every name, every symbol is a statement that you must be prepared to defend. If I draw the harbor, he will ask me why I trusted the Genoese. If I draw the swamp, he will ask why I trusted the Portuguese. He will say, "Piero, did you meet these men? Do you know their character? Or are you just a parrot copying the words of others without understanding?" I have no answer. I am a parrot. I am a boy in a quiet room, trying to guess the shape of a world I have never seen. And then there is the third chart, our own, made in this very workshop 50 years ago by a master I never knew. He was faced with this same problem, this same bay of whispers and contradictions. And what did he do? He gave up. He drew a monster, a wonderful sea serpent with scales of green and gold, its body coiled perfectly to fill the space of uncertainty. Its mouth is open, its tongue a red flicker of paint. It is a masterpiece of evasion. It is beautiful, and it is honest in its own way. It says, "Here we do not know."
I wish I could do that. I wish I could tell my master that the truth is not yet known and offer to draw him the most magnificent dragon he has ever seen. But that time has passed. Our patrons, our signori, they do not pay for dragons anymore. They pay for certainty. They pay for coastlines that will lead their ships to fortunes, not fables. Dragons do not help you find a place to trade for gold dust and ivory. They are a luxury we can no longer afford. So I am left with a choice, a harbor or a swamp, a lie of convenience or a lie of malice. Which poison do I choose? I try to think like the maestro, reconcile the data. What if they are both right? What if the Genoese captain arrived at the height of the rainy season, when the rivers were full and the bay was deep, and the Portuguese sailor came during the long dry season, when the water was low and the sandbars were exposed? It is possible. The world changes. The coasts are not static. But how do I draw that? How do I represent time on a flat piece of vellum? I could draw the harbor, but add a note. Mariners be warned. Waters may be shallow in the dry season. Yes, a note. That feels like a solution. A compromise. But the maestro hates notes. He says they are a cartographer's apology. If the line is true, it needs no explanation, he says. If the line is false, no explanation will save it. A note is a confession of doubt. And he is presenting this to the Council of 10. These men do not deal in doubt. They deal in power. A map filled with cautious notes is a weak map. A Venetian map must be strong. I pick up my quill. I dip it in the pot of black ink. The ink is made from oak galls and iron salts. It is permanent. Once it touches the vellum, it bites into the skin. It cannot be erased. It can only be scraped away with a sharp knife and a prayer. But that leaves a scar. A patch of rough, thin vellum that will never look right. The maestro would see it instantly. He would feel it with his fingertips, the ghost of a mistake. I hold the quill above the empty coastline. The drop of black ink swells at the tip, a dark tear. I can almost see the ship. It is a Venetian galley, its sails emblazoned with the winged lion of St. Mark. The captain is on the deck, a copy of my chart in his hands. He is pointing towards the shore. He is smiling. He is giving the order to turn into the bay. And then I see two futures. In one, the water is deep
and calm. The anchors drop into soft sand. The sailors give thanks for a safe harbor, a place to rest and take on fresh water. A new trade route is opened. Wealth flows back to Venice. And it all began here, with this line that I will draw. In the other, I hear the sound. A terrible, grinding crack as the hull rips open on a hidden sandbar. The screams of men, the splintering of oars, the ship groaning as it lists to one side, the sea pouring in, and the captain, his face a mask of disbelief, looking down at the map that betrayed him. My map, my line. My hand is shaking. I cannot do it. I pull the quill back. I set it down. A tiny black spot has fallen onto my practice sheet. A full stop. An end. But I have not even begun. The light from the window is turning golden. The bells of a nearby church are ringing for evening prayers. Soon the maestro will return. He will walk in and his eyes will go straight to this blank space on the vellum. He will look at me, and he will not need to say a word. I am trapped between a pretty lie, an ugly truth that might also be a lie, and a beautiful monster that I am not allowed to draw. Porto sicuro, morte certa. Which is it? The lives of men I will never know depend on my guess, and my master wants it by Friday. I pick up the Genoese chart again, then the Portuguese. My stomach is a knot of cold fear. I do not know. I simply do not know what to draw.
Such was the quiet crucible of the Renaissance mapmaker's workshop. Piero's anxiety, so deeply felt and articulated, was not his alone. It was the fundamental condition of his craft in an age of explosive discovery and imperfect information. These young apprentices, hunched over their precious vellum, were some of the world's first true data analysts. They were tasked with an immense act of synthesis, turning a chaotic flood of raw, often biased, and contradictory input into a single, authoritative output. Their work was far more than mere illustration. It was a delicate process of weighing the credibility of sources, of trying to understand the motives of unseen men, and of navigating the treacherous currents of commercial rivalry and national pride that flowed beneath every report. A single line on a chart was, as Piero's master noted, an argument, but it was also a verdict. In rendering his judgment on that small stretch of African coast, Piero was forced to become a detective, a psychologist, and a diplomat all at once. He had to decide if the Genoese chart's elegance was a sign of confident knowledge or deceptive intent. He had to parse whether the Portuguese sailors' frantic warning was born of genuine terror or a cunning desire to mislead. The sea serpent of the older map, while beautiful, represented a luxury of ignorance that their era could no longer sustain. The world was shrinking, and the demand for factual, usable knowledge was absolute. The blank spaces and the evasions used to fill them were becoming liabilities. The burden placed upon these young men was therefore immense. They worked at the precise intersection of art, science, and espionage. The intellectual challenge was profound. but so was the moral weight of their decisions. An error born of poor judgment could lead to financial ruin for a patron, or, far worse, the loss of ships and lives. It is a quiet form of pressure, one that does not announce itself with the clash of swords, but with the silent scratching of a quill and the ever-present fear of the scar left by the scraper on a ruined sheet of vellum. Piero's struggle was ultimately one of ink and parchment, a battle fought within the confines of his own mind and the walls of his master's workshop. But in other great maritime cities, for other apprentices, the dangers were not always so abstract. The secrets a map held could attract predators far more tangible than a mythical beast. When a chart depicted a route to unimaginable wealth, the battle of information could spill out from the workshop and into the shadowy alleys of the city. Let us now travel westward, from the shimmering canals of Venice to the wind-swept hills of Lisbon, where another apprentice found that the most dangerous thing on his map was not a coastline, but the knowledge of its existence.
If Venice was a city of contained, shimmering beauty, a jewel box connected to the world by its watery arteries, then Lisbon was a city perched on the edge of everything. It was a place of wind and hills, looking not inward to a familiar sea like the Mediterranean, but outward into the vast, terrifying, and promising expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. Where Venice was old money and established power, Lisbon was new, raw, and relentlessly ambitious. The very air felt different. It was cleaner, sharper, carrying the scent of the open ocean rather than the brackish lagoon. The sounds were of a city straining at its leash. The ringing of hammers on anvils in the shipyards, the creak of new rigging, the shouts of sailors in a dozen different languages mingling in the steep, cobbled streets that wound down to the bustling waterfront of the Tagus River. This was the capital of a kingdom that had bet its entire future on the conviction that the world was larger and richer than anyone had ever imagined. At the heart of this global enterprise was the Casa da India, the House of India. It was not a single house, but a sprawling complex of warehouses, counting rooms, and administrative offices that served as the nerve center for Portugal's burgeoning overseas empire. Here, every peppercorn from Malacca, every ounce of gold from the Mina coast, and every bolt of silk from the east was received, inventoried, taxed, and sold. It was an institution of immense, almost unimaginable power, the engine of a commercial empire that was the envy of all Europe. But its most valuable possession was not gold or spices. It was information. And all of that information was consolidated into a single sacred object, the Padrón Real, the royal standard.
The Padrón Real was Portugal's master map of the world. It was not a static document, but a living one, kept under the tightest security imaginable within the walls of the Casa da India. When a fleet returned from a voyage of discovery, the captain and pilot were immediately brought before the king's royal cosmographers, sworn to secrecy under penalty of death,
they would report their findings. A new river mouth, a favorable current, a previously unknown island, the precise latitude of a cape. This new data was then carefully, meticulously added to the master chart. The Padrón Real was therefore the most accurate and the most secret map on Earth. It contained the keys to an empire. To possess a copy was to know the sea routes to the sources of the world's wealth, information for which rival nations like Castile, Venice, or France would pay any price. It was not a map, it was an instrument of national policy, a state secret of the highest possible order. To work on the Padrón Real, or even on one of its official copies, was to enter a world of profound trust and suffocating paranoia. The workshops of the Casa de India were unlike the private ateliers of Venice. They were secure government facilities. The windows were high and barred. Armed guards patrolled the corridors. The atmosphere was one of silent, focused diligence. There was no room for artistic flourish or leisurely contemplation. The work was regimented, precise, and observed. The masters here were not just artists, they were officers of the crown, and their apprentices were state functionaries, bound by oaths of loyalty that carried the weight of treason. It is in this environment that we find our second apprentice, a young man named Miguel. Miguel had grown up in the port district of Alfama, and the rhythm of the tides and the ambition of the explorers were in his blood. He was sharp, with a steady hand and a discreet nature, qualities that had marked him for advancement. He had proven his loyalty and his skill, and so he had been given the ultimate honor and the ultimate burden. He was permitted to work on an official copy of a new section of the Padrón Real. As with Piero in Venice, Miguel's task was not to interpret or to adjudicate. The truth had already been established by the crown. His job was simply to replicate it, perfectly and without question. His was a task not of deduction, but of fidelity.
The section he was copying was the most sensitive piece of information in the known world. For decades, Portuguese sailors had been painstakingly pushing their way down the coast of Africa, searching for a southern passage to the Indies. Now they had found it. The chart before Miguel showed, for the first time, in a complete and verified form, the full shape of the continent's southern tip and the clear sea passage into the Indian Ocean. This single piece of cartography rendered Venice's monopoly on the overland spice trade obsolete. It was a key that would unlock a new age of Portuguese dominance and unimaginable wealth. The lines Miguel was tracing with his quill were not just geography, they were the blueprint for a revolution in global power. He worked in a small, guarded room, alone with the master chart and his blank sheet of parchment. The silence was absolute, broken only by the faint scratch of his pen. But beyond the stone walls of the workshop, the city of Lisbon teemed with hungry eyes and listening ears.
agents of the powerful Fugger banking family, spies in the pay of the Venetian Doge, Castilian diplomats with shadowy agendas. They all knew, or suspected, that Portugal had finally succeeded. They haunted the taverns and docksides, offering fortunes in gold for a whisper, a rumor, a hastily sketched map on a tavern napkin. The value of the vellum under Miguel's hand was beyond calculation. To a young apprentice who earned a few coins a week, the temptation to monetize such a secret must have been a constant, nagging thought. It is a story of when that abstract temptation took on a real human face, a quiet offer made in a moment of vulnerability that brings us to our next post. Every morning, I walk into the quiet room. The guards at the door know my face. They nod, but their eyes are hard. They do not see me, Miguel. They see a key that must not be lost. The room is always the same. It smells of stone and ink and clean parchment. There is one window, high up, with iron bars across it. The light that comes through is gray and serious. There is no dancing water light here like in Venice. This is the light of the crown, the light of the state. It is a watchful light. I unroll the master chart, the Padrone Real. My breath always catches. It is the most beautiful and most terrible thing I have ever seen. It is our kingdom's soul, drawn in ink. And my job is to copy one small part of it, the part that matters most, the great curve of Africa's hip, the turn towards the east, a line that my king believes will make us masters of the world. My hand must be steady, my focus absolute. A single slip, a careless smudge, and I would be lucky to be merely dismissed. This is not art. This is statecraft. When I am done for the day, the master inspects my work. He holds it next to the original. He uses his calipers. He measures every distance, every angle. He nods. He never smiles. He just nods, rolls up both charts, and locks them away in the great iron-bound chest. Then I am dismissed. The guards watch me as I leave. I can feel their eyes on my back all the way down the corridor. I used to feel proud. I would walk home through the steep streets of Alfama, my head held high. I am Miguel, the apprentice trusted with the king's map. I would buy a piece of grilled fish from a street vendor, the smell of charcoal and salt making my mouth water. I would go home to our small rooms, and my mother would look at my ink-stained fingers and know that her son was doing important work. It was a good feeling, a solid feeling. That feeling is gone now. It was stolen from me 3 days ago. I was walking home. It was twilight, that soft time when the lamps are being lit and the shadows grow long and tricky. I took a familiar shortcut through a narrow alley. It is usually empty. But he was there, waiting. He was not Portuguese. His clothes were dark and rich, made of fine wool, not the kind of thing you see in my neighborhood. He was older, with a neat gray beard and pale eyes. He looked like a wealthy merchant, from Flanders, perhaps. He smiled at me. It was not a friendly smile. It was a smile that owned the space around it. He said my name, Miguel. The sound of my own name from a stranger's lips was like a bucket of ice water down my back.
No one knows what I do. No one is supposed to know. I stopped. I could not help it. You are a gifted young man, he said. His Portuguese was very good, but the accent was there, a slight flatness to the vowels. I have heard that you have one of the steadiest hands in the Casa de India, a true artist. I said nothing. My throat was dry. My heart had begun to beat a fast, painful rhythm against my ribs.
I am a collector, he said, stepping a little closer. He smelled faintly of cloves and money. I have a passion for the sciences of geography and navigation. I believe that a well-made map is the greatest of all human achievements. He was talking quietly, reasonably, like a scholar, but his eyes were not scholarly. They were watching me, weighing me. I understand, he continued, that you are working with the very latest discoveries, the new Africa chart, a monumental achievement for your kingdom. I tried to walk away, but my feet felt like lead. I shook my head. I do not know what you are talking about, I whispered. It was a feeble lie. We both knew it. His smile did not change. There is no need to be coy. I admire your loyalty. It is a fine quality. But loyalty does not put food on the table, does it? It does not fix a leaking roof or buy a new dress for your mother. He knew about my life. The thought struck me with physical force. He had been watching me, following me. This was not a chance encounter. He opened the leather purse at his belt. He did not jingle it. He just tilted it so I could see inside. Gold. Not silver, not copper, gold coins. More than I could count in the dim light. They shone with a soft, hungry light. 100 gold florins, he said, his voice a low whisper. For a quick copy. A sketch. It need not be perfect, just the shape of the coast. For my private collection. No one would ever know. A few hours of work for a lifetime of security.
100 florins. My father was a fisherman. In his whole life, hauling nets in good weather and bad, he never saw a fifth of that amount. It was a fortune. It was a new life. I saw it. I saw my mother in a new dress. I saw a new roof on our home. I saw a future where I was not tired and poor. For a single, terrible second, I saw myself saying yes. And then I saw the other thing. I saw the executioner's block in the public square. I saw the penalty for treason. I saw my master's face, not angry, but full of a cold, bottomless disappointment. I saw my mother's shame. No, I said. The word came out as a croak. I shook my head again, harder this time. No. I turned and almost ran out of the alley. I did not look back, but I heard his voice, calm and untroubled, drift after me. The offer stands, Miguel. Think on it. I have not slept for 3 nights. Every time I close my eyes, I see his pale eyes. I see the gold shining in his purse. I am afraid. I am afraid of him, and I am afraid of what he wants. But there is another fear, a worse fear. I am afraid of myself. Because for 1 second, I was tempted. And now I am trapped. I cannot tell my master. What if this was a test, a loyalty test set by the crown? If I confess that I was approached, they might think I considered it.
They might see me as a risk. I would be dismissed. My life would be ruined. Or worse, they might think I am lying, that I have already sold the secret and am trying to cover my tracks. How can I prove my innocence?
But if I say nothing, I am concealing contact with a foreign agent. That is also a crime. And what if he approaches me again? What if he grows impatient? His smile was not that of a patient man. Every shadow now holds a threat. Every person I pass on the street is a spy. I look at the faces in the tavern, and I wonder if they are watching me. When I walk home, I feel his eyes on me, even if he is not there. The city, my home, has become a web, and I am the fly caught in it. Today at work, the Padrón Real felt different in my hands. It felt hot, dangerous, a curse. The beautiful lines, the elegant script, they all seem to mock me. This secret is too big for me. I am just a boy with a steady hand. I am not a courtier or a spy. The honor I felt is gone. Now it is just a weight that is crushing me. I said no. I keep telling myself that. I said no. But I did not report it. I walked away, and he is still out there, somewhere in this city. A man who collects secrets. And he knows my name. He knows where I live. I am afraid he will not take no for an answer. What do I do? Who can I possibly tell? Miguel's fear was not simple paranoia. It was a rational and deeply perceptive response to the world in which he lived. Here, in the heart of Lisbon, the map's role transcends that of a mere guide. It has become a pure instrument of power, a tangible representation of national ambition. The lines Miguel copied were the most sensitive state secrets of their time, and the workshop of the Casa da India was the geopolitical epicenter of the age, a place as critical and as contested as any modern intelligence agency. His story lays bare the immense pressure placed on the individuals at the very bottom of this pyramid of knowledge. Apprentices like Miguel were uniquely vulnerable. They possessed direct physical access to information that could change the fortunes of entire nations, yet they were often young, impressionable, and poorly paid. They were the weak link in the chain of secrecy, and the intelligence networks of rival powers knew it. The man in the alley, with his calm demeanor and his well-rehearsed cover as a collector, was a typical operative of the era. He represented a far more insidious threat than a common thief, using the quiet tools of bribery and psychological manipulation. Miguel's dilemma was therefore profound. He was trapped not just by the spy's offer, but by the very security apparatus designed to protect the secret. To speak up was to invite suspicion upon himself. To remain silent was to live in perpetual fear, and to be complicit in a crime of omission. This was the dark underside of the age of discovery. For every celebrated explorer returning with tales of wonder, there were quiet, frightened young men like Miguel, working in guarded rooms, who understood the true, brutal weight of that knowledge. They were the silent keepers of the keys to the empire, living daily with the knowledge that a single moment of temptation or a single misspoken word could lead to their own destruction. The secret itself became a burden, transforming a position of honor into one of terrifying isolation. While Miguel wrestled with the dangerous content of his map, a secret so potent it invited threats from the shadows, Other apprentices in other cities faced a different, though equally intense kind of pressure. For in the great centers of Renaissance wealth, a map was not always a tool of the state. It was also a symbol of status, a work of art destined for the wall of a Medici palace or a Florentine banker's study. In these cases, the map's value lay not just in its accuracy, but in its beauty. Let us leave the paranoid corridors of Lisbon and travel now to Florence, a city where aesthetics were their own form of power, and where one young apprentice discovered that the demands of a wealthy patron could be as unforgiving as those of a king.
Our journey now takes us inland, away from the salt-sprayed, spy-haunted ports of the Atlantic and the Adriatic, to the heart of Tuscany. We arrive in Florence, a city that ran not on ships, but on florins, a city whose power was built not on maritime exploration, but on banking, textiles, and an almost fanatical devotion to beauty. If Lisbon was a city of raw ambition, and Venice a city of shrewd commerce, Florence was a city of sublime intellect and cultivated taste. The very light seemed different here. It was not the shifting, watery light of a canal, nor the vast, harsh light of the open ocean. It was a clear, sharp, terrestrial light that fell on the terracotta tiles of Brunelleschi's dome and the marble skin of Michelangelo's David with an artist's precision, carving every detail into crisp relief. This was a city that saw itself as the inheritor of classical glory, a new Athens, where human genius was the most prized commodity of all. Here, power and status were demonstrated through patronage. A wealthy Florentine banker, the head of a great family like the Medici, the Strozzi, or the Pitti, did not merely hoard his wealth. He translated it into cultural capital by commissioning art. His public influence and private sophistication were expressed through the paintings that hung in his palazzo, the sculptures that adorned his gardens, and the books that filled his library. In this intensely aesthetic environment, the map acquired a new and complex identity. It was no longer solely a tool for navigation or an instrument of state policy. It had become a luxury good, a status symbol, a magnificent piece of decorative art to be displayed in a private study, the studiolo, alongside ancient coins, classical sculptures, and priceless manuscripts. It was a statement piece, meant to signal that its owner was a man of the world, a humanist who understood not only art and philosophy, but the expanding geography of his time. The cartographic workshop in Florence reflected this reality. It was less a mariner's supply shop and more a high-end artist's studio. The scents were still of ink and vellum, but they mingled with the delicate aroma of egg tempera, the sweet smell of gesso, and the faint metallic scent of gold leaf. Here you would find not only dividers and rulers, but also fine sable brushes, burnishing tools made of agate, and a dazzling array of pigments ground from precious minerals and exotic plants. The master of such a workshop was as much an artist as a scientist. His reputation rested not only on the accuracy of his coastlines,
but on the elegance of his calligraphy, the brilliance of his colors, and the harmony of his overall composition. He was a craftsman navigating the complex social world of wealthy, demanding, and often fickle patrons. This created the central tension of Florentine mapmaking, the constant, delicate negotiation between utility and beauty. On one hand, the map had to be scientifically credible. The patron, a sophisticated man of the Renaissance, would expect it to reflect the latest Portuguese discoveries and to be based on sound principles of projection and measurement. Its accuracy was a key component of its prestige. A map that was geographically naive was as worthless as a poorly painted fresco. The underlying web of rum lines, the precise plotting of ports and capes, this scientific skeleton had to be flawless. On the other hand, it had to be breathtakingly beautiful. This was the work of the illuminator. The map was a canvas for showcasing immense artistic skill. Coastlines were limned in gold. The seas were painted a rich blue, sometimes populated with elegant ships and mythical creatures rendered with exquisite detail. Elaborate borders, known as cartouches, would frame the map, often decorated with allegorical figures, coats of arms, and classical motifs. City names were written in elegant, soaring scripts, and major cities were marked with miniature, idealized paintings of their skylines. The map had to be an object that could hold its own in a room filled with masterpieces, a jewel for the mind as well as the eye.
These two imperatives, utility and beauty, were often at war. A flourish of calligraphy could obscure a vital place name. A beautifully painted mountain range might distort the sense of scale. And nowhere was this conflict more apparent than in the design of the compass rose. The compass rose was the functional heart of the chart's navigational grid, the point from which the all-important rum lines radiated. But it was also a natural focal point for the artist, a perfect miniature canvas for decorative invention. To make it too plain was to miss an opportunity for beauty. To make it too elaborate was to obscure its primary function, distracting the eye from the very lines it was meant to anchor. It is into this world of aesthetic high stakes that we introduce our third apprentice, Lorenzo. Lorenzo was a Florentine born and bred, gifted with a natural artist's eye and a hand that seemed born to hold a fine brush. While other apprentices labored over the precise mathematical plotting of coastlines, Lorenzo's talent and passion lay in illumination. He could lay a sheet of gold leaf so smoothly it looked like solid metal, and his scroll work was the envy of the workshop. He was young, ambitious, and perhaps a little too confident in his own artistic genius. His master had recently secured a major commission, a grand mappa mundi, a map of the entire known world for a member of a powerful banking family. This was not a chart for a sailor, but a masterpiece for a connoisseur. The pressure was immense, and Lorenzo, as the most talented illuminator, was given the honor of creating the map's centerpiece, the primary 32-point compass rose.
He saw this not as a technical task, but as his moment to shine, a chance to create a miniature work of art so beautiful it would be spoken of with admiration, securing his own reputation. He poured all of his skill and creativity into it, using the richest pigments and the finest gold leaf, creating an intricate, multi-layered design of dazzling complexity. When he was finished, he stood back, his heart swelling with pride at the beautiful, jewel-like object he had created. It is at this moment, as he admires his handiwork, just before his master's final inspection, that we find him.
I finished it an hour ago. The great compass rose. It is the most beautiful thing I have ever made. I used a shell filled with true lapis lazuli, ground in gum arabic, for the arrow pointing north. It is a blue so deep it feels like you could fall into it. The east is marked with a point of malachite green, for the lands of the rising sun. And the gold. I used an entire book of gold leaf. I laid it down over a bed of gesso and burnished it with an agate stone until it shines like a captured piece of the sun itself. It is not a flat painted thing. It has depth. It has life. I designed it myself, based on the rose window of Santa Croce. But I think mine is better, more intricate, more perfect. When it was done, I put down my brush and just looked at it for a long time. The light from the window caught the gold, and it threw a little shimmer onto the vellum. I felt like a master, not an apprentice. I felt like Brunelleschi must have felt when he looked at his dome. I have made something that was not in the world before, and it is perfect. I could not wait for Maestro Antonio to see it. I knew he would be amazed. He came in a few minutes ago. He is a quiet man. He does not waste words. I stood back from the table, my heart beating with pride. I did not say anything. I just watched his face, waiting for the smile.
He looked at the map for a long time, a very long time. The silence in the room grew loud. He looked at the coast of Spain, the shape of Italy, the new lands across the great ocean, and then his eyes settled on my compass rose. He leaned closer. I thought he was admiring the detail. Then he straightened up and sighed. It was a soft sound, but it felt like a thunderclap. "Lorenzo," he said, and his voice was not angry. It was worse. It was tired. "It is beautiful, a true masterpiece of illumination. The guild would give you an award for it." My heart soared. I knew it. "And," he continued, looking at me for the first time, "it is a complete failure. The floor fell away from me. I did not understand. Failure? It was perfect." "Maestro?" I whispered. He pointed a long, ink-stained finger at the map, but he was not pointing at my compass rose. He was pointing at the faint, red rum lines that radiated out from it. "What is the purpose of this object, Lorenzo?" "It is a map, Maestro, a map of the world for Signora Strozzi." "And what is the purpose of a map?" he asked, his voice still quiet and patient. "To show the world, to guide, to understand." "To guide," he repeated, nodding slowly. "The eye must follow the lines, the coastlines, the rum lines. They are the language of the map. They contain the knowledge. Everything else, All the color, all the gold is ornament. It is there to support the language, not to shout over it.
He tapped the edge of my compass rose, my beautiful, shining jewel. Your ornament is shouting, Lorenzo. It is screaming. It is so loud, so brilliant, that I can no longer hear the map. My eye does not want to follow the line to Lisbon. It wants to stay here, lost in your little golden flower. You have made the frame more important than the painting. You have made a guide that leads nowhere but to itself. Signore Strozzi is paying for a map of the world, not a painting of a compass. This is useless. And suddenly I could see it. He was right. My heart turned to a cold, heavy stone in my chest. My masterpiece was a monstrous, gaudy weed that had grown in the middle of the garden and choked out all the useful plants. The perfect blue was an arrogant shout. The gleaming gold was a blinding vanity. I felt sick. My face burned with shame. He let me stand there in my misery for a moment. Then he put a hand on my shoulder. You are a fine artist, Lorenzo. One day you will be a master, but a master understands balance. You have learned a hard lesson today. He took his hand away. Now you will learn another. He went to his tool chest and came back with a small curved knife with a razor-sharp edge. He handed it to me. You will remove it, he said simply. You will scrape it off, every last trace of pigment and gold, and you will do it without scarring the vellum. Signore Strozzi's map cannot have a hole in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The vellum must be smooth enough to take a new, simpler design. Pray that you can do it. And then he left me alone with my failure. That was an hour ago. I am still here. My hand is cramping, my eyes burn. This is the worst work I have ever done. Scraping vellum is a kind of torture. It is the skin of a calf, stretched and dried. The ink and the gesso I used for the gold have soaked into the fibers. They have become part of the skin. To remove them, I have to shave away the very surface of the vellum itself. The knife has to be held at a perfect angle. Too steep, and it chatters, leaving ugly marks. Too shallow, and it doesn't cut. I am scraping away my own work. My beautiful, intricate lines. My perfect, shining gold. It comes off in tiny, dusty flakes. The gold that I was so proud of is now just a worthless powder on a rag. The deep lapis blue is a stubborn stain that refuses to yield. With every movement of the knife, my heart is in my throat. If I press too hard for a fraction of a second, the blade will slice through. The entire map, weeks of work by every man in this shop, will be ruined. It will be my fault, my arrogance. A few minutes ago, my hand cramped and the knife slipped. It cut a thin, shallow line, maybe the length of a fingernail, into the vellum. My blood ran cold. I stopped, I breathed, and I burnished the spot with my agate stone, over and over, trying to smooth the scar. It is less noticeable now, but I know it is there. I can feel it, a tiny ridge of failure. I have scraped away about half of it. The ghost of my design is still there, a faint stain of color. It looks like a faded bruise. I hate it. I made a beautiful thing, and now I am methodically, painstakingly destroying it.
my masterpiece, my failure. And I have to pray to God that in my arrogance I have not destroyed this entire map along with it. The sun is setting. I think I will be here all night.
Lorenzo's ordeal with the scraper and the knife is a quiet but profound drama. In his story, the apprentice's struggle is not with external threats like spies or the ambiguities of sailors' tales, but with an internal battle between his own artistic ambition and the fundamental purpose of his craft. His master's lesson was harsh, but it was essential. It reveals that the Renaissance cartographer, especially in a center of aesthetic obsession like Florence, had to be more than a geographer and more than an artist. He had to be a master of balance. The luxury map was a unique object, embodying the core tensions of the era. It was born of science, but destined for the art collection. It had to speak the precise language of mathematics and navigation, while also singing with the beauty of a painting. This duality transformed the map from a simple tool into a complex cultural artifact. The patron who commissioned it was buying not just information, but a tangible piece of the new, expansive, human-centered worldview. He wanted to own the world not just intellectually, but aesthetically. Lorenzo's beautifully rendered compass rose failed because it celebrated its own artistry more than it celebrated the world it was meant to describe. It broke the delicate harmony, prioritizing the vanity of the creator over the vision of the owner. The painstaking act of removing his own work, flake by flake, is a powerful metaphor for the humbling of an artist. The pride and inspiration that flowed so easily from his brush had to be undone with the slow, terrifying precision of a blade. It was a lesson in craft over art, in purpose over ego. A lesson paid for with a cramped hand, a burning eye, and the constant, sickening fear of a single catastrophic slip. He was not just scraping away pigment and gold, he was scraping away his own youthful arrogance, learning the difficult but necessary wisdom that true mastery lies not in shouting, but in achieving a perfect, resonant harmony. Lorenzo's struggle was ultimately with the known world, how to depict it, how to balance its science with its beauty. But for every coastline that was meticulously drawn, for every city elegantly lettered, there remained vast regions of profound silence on the map. The ultimate challenge for a cartographer was not how to draw what was known, but how to face what was not. We turn now to our final account, to an older, more seasoned apprentice looking at the great, intimidating blank space at the bottom of the world, a space that asked a question not of skill, but of philosophy.
We have journeyed from the cramped workshops of Venice and Lisbon to the elegant studios of Florence, exploring the intricate pressures that shape the life of a cartographer's apprentice. We have seen them wrestle with conflicting data, with state secrets, and with the demands of artistic patrons. For our final story, we zoom out. We are no longer looking at a single coastline or a decorative compass rose. We are in a great workshop, perhaps in Lisbon or Antwerp, before a magnificent, near-complete mappa mundi, a map of the entire world, laid out across a table so large it dominates the room. This map
is a testament to a century of daring and diligence. It is a triumphant declaration of humanity's expanding grasp of its own planet. The familiar, jagged coastline of Europe is rendered with confident precision, bristling with the names of cities and kingdoms. The Mediterranean is a dense web of islands and ports, the cradle of known civilization. To the west, the newly discovered Americas are taking shape, their coastlines still subject to revision but undeniably present. Two vast continents separating the Atlantic from the great South Sea. Africa, whose southern tip was once the subject of fearful speculation, is now rendered in its entirety, a recognizable form that has finally yielded its secrets to the persistent mariner. To the east, the rich islands of the Indies are scattered like jewels across a shimmering blue sea. The known world is a tapestry of breathtaking detail, woven from the threads of countless voyages, a testament to the courage of those who sailed into the unknown and the skill of those who charted their return. But as the eye travels down the surface of this magnificent creation, away from the dense detail of the northern hemisphere, the tapestry begins to fray. The confident ink lines become more tentative, the names of places grow sparse, the vibrant colors fade, and finally, at the very bottom of the world, the detail stops altogether. Here, stretching across the entire width of the map, is a vast, silent, and intimidating expanse of blank vellum. This is the great enigma, the final frontier of the Renaissance mind, Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. The existence of this land was not a matter of discovery, but of philosophy. The idea, inherited from the ancient Greeks, was one of balance. Geographers like Aristotle and Ptolemy had argued that for the earth to be stable, for the northern landmasses of Europe, Asia, and Africa to not topple the globe, there must be an equivalent, massive continent in the south to act as a counterweight. For centuries, this was accepted as logical necessity. The southern continent had to exist. The only question was its size, its shape, and what it contained. Now, as ships pushed further south than ever before, they had failed to find it, deepening the mystery and making the cartographer's problem more acute. This vast whiteness on the map was a representation of the absolute limit of knowledge, and it presented the mapmaker with a profound philosophical and creative problem. What does one do with the void? How does one map ignorance itself? To simply leave it blank was, for many, an unsatisfying option. It was an admission of failure, and aesthetically jarring emptiness on an otherwise richly detailed object. A patron paying a fortune for a world map did not want a world that was visibly incomplete. And so cartographers developed strategies for filling the void.
This is the truth behind the popular myth of "Here be dragons." While that specific phrase is famously found on only one or two historical artifacts, the practice of populating unknown regions with illustrations was incredibly common. It was a way to manage the anxiety of the unknown. If the land itself was a mystery, they could at least fill it with the creatures of myth and legend.
griffins with the body of a lion and the head of an eagle, unicorns, pure and white, Patagonian giants, based on sailors' exaggerated tales, and the truly bizarre blemmies, headless men with their faces in their chests, a creature described by ancient writers and believed to inhabit the hot lands of the south. These were not necessarily acts of deception, but a form of speculative illustration, a way of saying, we don't know what is here, but it might be wondrous or monstrous. Other times, they would draw what seemed logical, vast, impenetrable mountain ranges or endless deserts, reflecting the belief that the southern pole was a region of deadly extremes. It is before this great, silent emptiness that we find our final apprentice, Duarte. He is older now, a man in his late 20s, on the cusp of becoming a master in his own right. He has spent nearly half his life in this workshop. He has seen the world change one chart at a time. He is a thoughtful, serious man who understands that a map is never just a picture of the world, but also a picture of what we think about the world. His master has given him the final task for the great Mappa Mundi. The map is finished, save for this one immense problem. The patron wants the map completed, and the master does not wish to leave a gaping void at the bottom. The instruction given to Duarte was simple, yet terrifying in its scope. Fill the space, Duarte. Give it character. The choice of what to draw, how to characterize the unknown, has been left entirely to him. It is a test not of his technical skill, but of his imagination and his philosophical courage. As he stands before the blankness, a piece of charcoal in his hand, he confronts the ultimate question for a man of his profession. When you have run out of facts, what do you draw?
For 6 months, we have worked on this map. I have personally drawn the coast of Africa, a place I feel I have visited in my mind 100 times. I have painted the islands of the Caribbean, giving them names that still sound strange on the tongue. I have traced the trade winds in thin blue lines, the currents that are the secret highways of the ocean. The top half of this map, our world, is filled with life. It is filled with knowledge, bought with the lives of sailors and the fortunes of kings. It is a beautiful, intricate, truthful thing. I am proud of it. And then there is the bottom half. My master, a good man who was growing old and tired, came to me this morning. He pointed to the great emptiness at the south of the world, a vast sea of blank vellum. He said, "It is time to finish it, Duarte." The patron grows impatient. I asked him what I should draw. What new reports have come in? Has a ship finally rounded that last stubborn cape and seen what lies beyond? He shook his head. There are no reports. There is nothing. He put a hand on my shoulder. You are almost a master yourself, Duarte. You know the theories, you know the stories. Give it character. Fill the space. And then he left me here, alone, with the whole bottom of the world to invent. Fill the space. Such simple words. Such an impossible task.
I could draw mountains. It would be logical. The world needs balance. Great continents have great mountain ranges, spines of stone to hold them up. I could sketch a mighty chain of snow-capped peaks, grander than the Alps, and call them the Mountains of the Moon, a name we use when we have no other. It would look plausible. It would look scientific. The patron would nod and be impressed by the logic of it. But I would know. I would know that I have drawn a shadow, a guess. I have filled the emptiness with a lie of my own making, a lie that wears the mask of reason. There's no honor in that. Or I could do what the old masters did. I have the books. I could open the bestiary and choose my beasts. I could draw a griffin, its wings spread wide, guarding a golden coast. I could draw a unicorn, dipping its horn into a river to purify the water. I could draw the strange, headless blemmies that the ancient writers spoke of and scatter them across a plain. It would be beautiful. It would be dramatic. It would fill the space with wonder and with terror. It would be an homage to the traditions of our craft. But I have been a mapmaker for 15 years. I have talked to the sailors myself, the men with sun-baked skin and haunted eyes who have actually been to the far corners of the earth, and in all their tales, they have never once seen a griffin. They have found new kinds of monkeys, strange birds with bright feathers, but never a dragon. They have found other men with different customs and different gods, but never men with their faces in their chests. The world, it seems, is more mundane and more wondrous than our old stories. To draw monsters now feels dishonest. It feels like a step backward. It is an admission that we have learned nothing, that we still hide from the dark in fear. We are supposed to be men of a new age. We are supposed to be mapping the world as God truly made it, not as we fear it to be. My real task is to draw the truth, but the truth here is that there is no truth to draw. The truth is the emptiness itself, and that is the terrifying thing. I am a man who deals in lines. My life's work is to put lines on a surface. A line which says, here is the coast, here is the river, here is the boundary. The lines create order from chaos. They make the world known. But here, I am defeated. The blank vellum mocks me. It is a perfect, silent, white scream of ignorance. It is the one thing a mapmaker cannot map, the void. I look at this empty space and I feel a kind of vertigo. It is a hole in the world. From my entire life, I have watched this map change. I remember when the bottom of Africa was a straight line, a guess. I remember when the great Western Ocean was empty before the reports of Columbus came back. I have spent my life watching the blank spaces shrink, watching the light of knowledge push back the shadows. And this is what is left. The last great fortress of the unknown. To fill it with a fantasy, mountain or monster, feels like a desecration. It is like covering up a wound with a pretty painting instead of admitting the wound is there. It is a failure of courage. My courage. But the master's words echo in my head. The patron will not pay for a blank space. That is the other truth. The truth of commerce. We are craftsmen. We have to sell our work. And our patrons want a finished world. They do not want to be reminded of how little we truly know. They want a map that makes them feel like masters of a world that is understood. They want a pretty lie. So I am trapped. My principles as a cartographer tell me to leave it blank. My duty as an apprentice tells me to obey my master and fill it. It is a choice between betraying my craft and betraying my master. I pick up a piece of charcoal. It feels heavy. I hold it over the white expanse. My hand hovers over the place where a new continent might be born from my imagination. I could create a world with this piece of carbon, a world of my own choosing. The power of it is terrifying. I am not a god. I am a mapmaker.
I'm supposed to record creation, not invent it. I make a small, faint line, a curve, the beginning of a coastline. It looks wrong, presumptuous. I rub it out with my thumb, leaving a gray smudge, a smudge of indecision. I have to draw something. A mountain range? A desert? A beast with wings? A lie? My only choice is to decide which lie feels the most honest. And I do not know the answer.
Duarte's quiet paralysis before the blank vellum is, in many ways, the final and most profound of all the apprentice's burdens. His struggle is not with too much information, but with a complete absence of it. He is confronting the void itself, the absolute edge of human knowledge, and is being asked to give it a name and a face. This was the ultimate philosophical test for a Renaissance mapmaker, a man whose entire profession was built on the faithful representation of reality. When reality ended, what was his duty? The concept of terra incognita was a mirror for the age. The decision to fill the void with terrifying beasts, illogical mountain ranges, or honest blankness revealed a great deal about a cartographer's and a culture's relationship with the unknown. For centuries, the unknown was a place of myth and monsters, a canvas for the imagination. But Duarte stands at a turning point. He is part of a generation that has seen the world's myths retreat in the face of exploration. He belongs to a craft that is slowly, painstakingly moving from a tradition of speculative art to one of empirical science. His personal hesitation, his feeling that drawing a monster is a step backward, is the quiet dawn of a new, more modern consciousness. His crisis is one of profound integrity. His hand, trained for 15 years to trace the truth, refuses to create a fiction. The blank space on the map becomes a question about the nature of truth itself. Is it better to create a beautiful or logical lie, or to present an uncomfortable, empty truth? His master and his patron demand the former, but Duarte's own conscience longs for the latter. He is trapped between the commercial and aesthetic demands of his world and the burgeoning scientific spirit of his craft. His paralysis is not a failure of imagination, but a testament to his deep respect for the truth, even when that truth is simply, we do not know. And so, through the eyes of Piero, Miguel, Lorenzo, and Duarte, we have glimpsed the quiet, intricate world of the cartographer's apprentice. We have felt the weight of their unique burdens, the intellectual burden of precision when faced with contradiction, the terrifying burden of state secrets in a world of spies, the aesthetic burden of beauty when navigating the demands of a patron, and finally, the philosophical burden of ignorance when confronting the great silent voids on the map.
These were the burdens of drawing the world. Behind the celebrated voyages of discovery and the grand pronouncements of kings, there were quiet rooms where young men faced immense pressures. They were the unseen artisans of an expanding world, tasked with giving it form and coherence. Their stories remind us that every ancient map is more than just a guide. It is a document of human struggle. It is a record of doubt, of fear, of ambition, and of conscience. Each line represents a decision, each splash of color a judgment, and each blank space a confrontation with the profound and humbling limits of knowledge. In their patient hands, the world was not merely copied, but wrestled into existence, one careful, heavily weighted line at a time. As we leave these workshops to the silence of the past, let the stories of these apprentices gently recede. Let the scent of ink and old parchment fade, and the weight of their world drift away. The maps are rolled and stored, the candles are extinguished, and the quiet of the night settles over the sleeping cities. May your own thoughts now find their rest. May your rest be peaceful, and your dreams be quiet. Until next time.